Ninth part of excerpt from Class 01 of Professor Olavo de Carvalho's online philosophy course on March 14, 2009. Student asks, how can one break the false idea that appealing to Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle as the criterion of philosophy is a pure argument from authority? Olavo replies, well, but it's very simple. Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle started this activity, and we are only in it because Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle began it, so they have already delimited the field of what we are doing. It's not even a matter of you saying that they were better philosophers than the philosophers of modernity. They indeed are, but that's not the point. It happens that they defined the field. And what we are doing is continuing what they started. If we want to challenge them, we have to do so critically, and not simply erase everything and say that we are going to start from scratch, because otherwise there are no historical reasons for you to study what you are studying. This is the same as asking why you have to obey Brazilian laws. When you were born, there was already something called Brazil, and you were born within this circumstance. You didn't create it, and therefore you are not free to invent laws off the top of your head. You can even be against the currently existing laws, but you will have to start from them, because they are the reality, the ground on which you stand. Just as the philosophy of Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle is the ground on which all subsequent philosophy is based. The historian of philosophy Arthur Lovejoy said that all philosophy is nothing more than a collection of footnotes to Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. We hardly investigate any question that has not been raised by them, and in most cases, the approaches we follow represent nothing more than aspects of the problem that were raised by them themselves. In general, any contemporary philosophical discussion is repeating alternatives that were formulated by Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. We cannot get out of the territory delimited by them simply because that territory is philosophy. You may even dislike it, throw everything away, and do something else, as Nietzsche did. But if it's something else, started by you, or by Nietzsche, with nothing to do with philosophy in the sense that the word historically makes sense. From the beginning, we need to have a very clear distinction. One thing is philosophical activity, the effective search for maximum credibility, the articulation of thought, and existential seriousness in the affirmation of truths and supposed truths that you find. And another completely different thing is philosophical culture. Acquiring philosophical culture means absorbing the results that other philosophers have obtained in an effort similar to the one you are making. But if you don't have a very clear hierarchy of intellectual authority for yourself, that is, if you don't know what the authority is, within you, to say yes or no, there's no point in wanting to absorb what others have done, because you will be absorbing from the wrong place and through the wrong channel. Developing the notion of this inner judge, which is marked not only by credibility, rationality, and consistency, but also by seriousness and sincerity, this is the first point. You will try to exercise philosophy as sincerely as Socrates did. Sincerity means, in this case, simply the presence of your consciousness, that is, you will not say things that come from the periphery of your being, that you will forget the next day, or that you yourself will not take seriously, because otherwise our study will become just an imitation of contemporary academic philosophy. If you are interested in that, you have to attend Paolo Giraldelli's course, not mine. We are not here for games. Who will judge your seriousness? Am I? Is it the academic institution? Is it the professor? No. It can't be like that, because if you place your own intimate judgment under the judgment of a third party, philosophy is over. Philosophy is precisely the search for an internal capacity that you have to discern the truth within the maximum human measure, and therefore you yourself will have to be the judge of the thing. But if you want to be the judge, you have to prepare for it. You need to seek within yourself a point of maximum seriousness to be able to have maximum credibility. I give this exercise because it is precisely in this ideal image that you make of your own completed life that the judge will be. Let's go back to the example of confession. I will use religious terminology, but please see that this could be explained in other ways. Suppose you go to the confessional to confess a sin to the priest. You know that the impulse that leads you to confess is not the same as what led you to commit the sin. The sin was committed based on some immediate impulse, greed, lust, or whatever crap. As is normal for human beings, you let yourself be carried away by some impulse that promised you satisfactions or rewards, but afterwards you regretted it. What does repentance mean? It means examining what you did, and seeing that it does not correspond to the high expectations you had in relation to yourself. Of course, the part that repents is hierarchically superior to the part that committed the sin. The part that committed the sin was a fragment of you, an aspect of you that wanted certain satisfactions without taking into account the consequences that this would have for the rest of your personality. The part that repents, no, it is taking into account the whole of your personality and seeing the negative effects that that sin had on you as a whole. So it is clear that this part is hierarchically superior, because it encompasses the other part and many others. The part that repents is no different from the one that sinned, it is just larger, superior, more comprehensive. Imagine, for example, that you arrived one day at your friend's house and his wife was there, in a nightgown, half naked, and you couldn't resist. It's an entirely normal human impulse. Only the following happens: besides the part that desires the half-naked woman, there is another part of you that is loyal to your friend, and that part was evidently forgotten, despised, and harmed at that moment. Afterwards, what do? You compare the two things. You compare the erotic impulse you had at that moment with the impulse of loyalty to your friend. These are two parts of you. At the moment of the mistake, only one came into action, as if the others did not exist. One aspect of your consciousness overlapped the others, swallowed them, and destroyed them. Then you have to recover the integrity of consciousness, and for that you will compare the various aspects. In this self-examination, there is a rise in the level of consciousness. Note well, I spoke of comparing two things, the erotic impulse and loyalty, in this case, but it's not just two aspects that are at stake, there are many others. There is, for example, the whole problem of relative gravity. What is the extent of the loyalty you actually feel for your friend? And what is the extent and gravity of your offense? Suppose, for example, that the husband beats his wife every day, doesn't bring money home, only drinks and lives with other women, etc. This does not mean that you should sleep with his wife, but morally the gravity of the thing diminishes greatly. Now, if the person is a good person, a loyal friend who helps you, and you still betray him with his wife, it's because you are really worthless. There is therefore this very complex judgment of the relative gravity of things. To make a confession, I don't even say to the priest, but even to yourself, you have to take all these factors into account. What is the moral norm from which you judge yourself? The Penal Code, the 10 Commandments, the Code of Hammurabi, the laws of Noah. It can be anything else, but all of this is external in relation to you. If you have read the 10 Commandments, for example, who, within you, understood them? How do you understand and interpret them? Not just any understanding of the 10 Commandments will do, it has to be the highest, most comprehensive, most integrated, and most organized understanding. It can't be just anything because, sometimes, for example, when you commit a sin, you feel within you an accusing voice that reduces you to zero, makes you revolt against the universe, and leads you to commit an even greater sin. Not just any repentance will do, it has to be a repentance that integrates and elevates you, that brings together all the elements of your soul and life and raises them up. It cannot be something that depresses you even more, because otherwise you will fragment yourself even further. The moral judgment that most people make about their actions is sometimes more immoral than the sins they committed, because that judgment is based on an even lower passion than the one that led them to sin. This exercise that I gave is a first step in the constitution of your inner judge. You will not take just any idea or impulse that occurs to you, any of these countless subpersonalities, these improvised selves that we create to please certain reference groups or to appease our own fears, as your inner judge. Would you take just any Tom, Dick, or Harry to be a judge at law, to judge serious cases of homicide, rape, etc.? No. At least ideally, to be a judge at law, one must be a qualified, serious, responsible, mature person who knows human situations. Today we see 21-year-old judges sending people to jail, but that is a disgrace. There should be a minimum age to be a judge, 35 years old. So that the person has some life experience and can understand how things are. But if the judges who make up the national justice system are not qualified, at least you must have, within yourself, a qualified judge of yourself, and that judge must be your highest part. The highest part is the one that sees all the others, and that can weigh and compare the various factors. Justice is represented by a scale precisely because it always seeks the sense of proportions. This first step, the exercise of the obituary, consists exactly in you defining what you consider to be your highest part, and this part is what will be the qualified interlocutor of the omniscient listener. This notion of the omniscient listener is absolutely fundamental. Not only for religious people, but for all of philosophy. Sometimes the philosopher considers that the highest court is something he calls reason, but when we examine later what reason consists of, we will see that within it is embedded the notion of the omniscient listener. Reason is not just a schematics of thought. How could a mere schematics of thought be the highest judge of all human knowledge? It could never be, there has to be something more than that. This here will be a constant practice, you reporting to what is highest and best in you, so that you learn to observe and judge yourself with wisdom, with humanity, and taking into account the whole of what you know. There is no point in defining philosophy as love of wisdom and studying it if you yourself do not seek wisdom within yourself. And it is not a simple search for wisdom, but the search to transform oneself into a sage. The sage exists within you only as a remote ideal, but this remote ideal is part of you, and it is you. Gradually, you will absorb the other lower parts, and these parts will make up aspects of the sage's personality. This personality will never be ready. For only God has wisdom. We, as Pythagoras said, are only lovers of wisdom. When we speak of lovers of wisdom, we are assuming that wisdom exists, for how could we love something that does not even exist? Wisdom exists only as a possibility, but it exists after all, and it is this possibility that you will have to strive to realize. Later, we will study what the concept of wisdom is in classical philosophy, and we will deal with the documentation, with the texts. But for now, calm down, we will have no text, we will have meditation, self-analysis, self-knowledge, seriousness, and a whole work that you will carry out on your own soul first. And if we start like this, it is because philosophy itself began like this. Philosophy began with Socrates, and between Socrates and Aristotle the development of philosophy was monstrous, perhaps greater than in all the following 20 centuries. The leap that goes from the first speculations of Socrates to that edifice of knowledge articulated by Aristotle is of immense progress, and never again has such rapid growth been observed in philosophy. And we will also follow the same path. We will begin with the moral and political speculations of Socrates, and we will climb the steps until we reach a technical domain at the level that Aristotle defined, and which is to this day the parameter for judging everything. No one has left this parameter to this day. One can improve one piece or another of logic, of this or that method, but the ideal of philosophical integrity was already given in Greece once and for all.